Admiral Ulthera's four arms moved in perfect synchronization across the holographic display, each appendage adjusting shield configurations as another Vexor bombardment threatened to overwhelm the Confederate homeworld's defenses. Her crystalline skin reflected the red emergency lights of the command center, creating a kaleidoscope of warning signals across the walls. Direct hit on District 7. A tactical officer announced, their voice wavering. Civilian casualties estimated at. Spare me the numbers, Ulthera interrupted, her compound eyes fixing on the massive Vexor dreadnoughts descending through the atmosphere. The Confederation, for all its technological advancement and unity of 17 species, was losing. Not slowly, not gradually, but with the mathematical precision that made the Vexor so terrifyingly efficient. That's when her personal communicator chimed with a priority message from the most unlikely of sources, the archaeological corps. Admiral, Dr. Rickstall's voice crackled through, heavy with both excitement and fear. We found something in the shrouded asteroid belt. Something impossible. Ulthera almost dismissed the call. Archaeology seemed meaningless when their civilization teetered on the brink. Unless you found an ancient superweapon, Doctor, I don't have time for. That's exactly what we found. The Admiral froze, all four hands hovering mid-motion above the tactical displays. Explain. It's a warship. Admiral. Massive. Hidden inside one of the asteroids we've been excavating. But here's the impossible part. It's human in origin. Impossible. Ulthera scoffed. Humans barely reached their moon when we first contacted them 30 years ago. They're children among the stars. The dating analysis is conclusive, Rickstall insisted. The ship is at least 50,000 years old. And Admiral, it's still powered up. We can detect energy signatures unlike anything in Confederate or Vexor databases. Another explosion rocked the command center. The shields were failing faster now. Ulthera watched as perfect formations of Vexor fighters executed mathematically optimal attack patterns, their weapons finding every weakness in the Confederate defenses. Send me the coordinates, she ordered, her mind racing. The Confederation's leadership had always treated humans as primitive allies, useful for their unusual creativity, but hardly a major power. Yet, if Rickstall was right, the data packet arrived, and Ulthera's compound eyes widened as she processed the scans. The ship was enormous, easily dwarfing Confederate capital ships. Its design was both elegant and savage, with lines that spoke of artistic beauty and terrible purpose. Energy readings suggested weapon systems that defied known physics. Admiral, her tactical officer called out, Vexor forces have breached the outer defense ring. We have 18 hours until total planetary surrender, based on their standard conquest algorithms. Ulthera made her decision. Get me a secure channel to Earth. Emergency protocols, highest priority. But Admiral, the non-interference treaties mean nothing if we're all dead or enslaved. She straightened her uniform, her crystalline form catching the light. If there's even a chance this ship is their legacy, we need their help to awaken it. And if the dating is accurate, she paused, contemplating the implications, then everything we thought we knew about humanity might be wrong. As the communication officers scrambled to establish the link to Earth, Ulthera studied the scans again. The ship's design incorporated patterns she'd seen in human art, in their music, in their seemingly chaotic, but strangely effective military tactics. It was both familiar and alien, like humanity itself. Channel established, Admiral. Earth's Global Defense Council is responding. Ulthera took a deep breath, watching another perfect formation of Vexor ships descend through the failing shields. She was about to shatter decades of diplomatic precedent, but with extinction as the alternative, she had no choice. This is Admiral Ulthera of the Confederation. We need your help. We found something that belongs to you, something very old and very powerful. And we need you to wake it up. Dr. Catherine Kate Sullivan stood in the cavernous hangar of the Confederate science vessel, staring up at what should have been impossible. The ancient warship towered above them, its hull a dark material that seemed to drink in the light. Geometric patterns traced across its surface in dormant lines that Kate suspected would illuminate once powered. "Well, that's definitely not Aztec," she muttered, earning a confused look from Commander James Rodriguez beside her. It was an old joke between them, referencing the academic rivals who'd mocked her theories about advanced prehistorical human civilizations. "Disappointed?" James asked, his weathered face breaking into a slight grin. The veteran starship engineer had worked with her on enough controversial projects to know her hunches usually paid off. "Vindicated," Kate replied, pulling out her scanner. "Though I'd expected to find evidence of ancient human advancement on Earth, not." She gestured at the massive vessel. "Whatever this is." 3 different teams of Confederate scientists scurried around the ship's entrance, their various alien anatomies making their frustration evident in different ways. The crystalline Larry were literally glowing with agitation, while the gaseous Helden's clouds had turned a deep purple of puzzlement. 15 separate attempts to interface with the vessel's systems, Dr. Rickstoll reported, approaching them, each more sophisticated than the last. The ship acknowledges the attempts, but refuses them. It's like trying to have a conversation with someone who can hear you but doesn't understand a word you're saying. Kate approached the main entrance, a 30-foot-high aperture that reminded her more of ancient Roman architecture than modern spacecraft design. Her hand reached out toward the hull. "Dr. Sullivan, please," Rickstoll called out. "We've established strict protocols for—" The ship hummed. A soft blue light pulsed beneath Kate's palm, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. The geometric patterns nearest her position flickered briefly to life before fading again. "How did you do that?" Rickstoll demanded, all 6 eyes blinking rapidly. "I didn't do anything," Kate said, but her mind was racing. "James, come here. Try touching it." Commander Rodriguez pressed his palm against the hull. Again, the ship responded, this time with a deeper hum and a broader ripple of light. "Fascinating," Kate whispered. "It's not just recognizing human DNA. That would be too simple. It's responding to our neural patterns, our bioelectric field." She turned to Rickstoll. "Your previous attempts, you were trying to interface through technology, weren't you?" The alien scientist nodded. "Of course. Our most advanced quantum neural interfaces." "That's the problem," James interrupted, his engineering mind putting it together. "This ship wasn't designed for technological interfacing. It was designed for direct human interaction." Kate nodded excitedly. "The patterns, the way they flow, they're not just decorative. They're meant to resonate with human brainwave patterns. Our ancestors built this ship to respond to human consciousness itself." An explosion rocked the science vessel, sending everyone stumbling. Red alert klaxons began blaring. "The Vexer have found us," Rickstoll announced grimly. "Our shields won't hold against a dedicated attack fleet." Kate pressed her palm more firmly against the hull, closing her eyes. This time, she didn't try to analyze or understand. She just felt. The ship's hum changed pitch, becoming almost melodic. "It's like it's trying to sync with our thought patterns," she said. Not logical thoughts, but she remembered her childhood dream of flying, the pure joy of imagining soaring through clouds. The geometric patterns around her hand blazed to life. "Intuition," James finished. "Raw human intuition." He turned to Rickstoll. "How long until the Vexir reach us?" 17 minutes at current velocity." Kate met James's gaze, saw the sane wild idea in his eyes. "Traditional physics and mathematical protocols aren't going to wake this ship," she said. "We need to stop thinking like scientists and start thinking like humans." The ship's hum grew louder, as if agreeing with her. The ship's interior defied alien architectural logic. While Confederate and Vexir vessels were designed with ruthless efficiency, the ancient human ship's corridors curved in ways that felt natural to human movement. The walls pulsed with soft light that followed their steps, responding to their presence like a living thing. "These markings," Kate said, running her fingers along symbols that seemed to shift and change as she studied them. They're not just a written language. They're responsive. Her touch caused the symbols to ripple and flow, transforming into different patterns. James was examining what appeared to be a control interface. No buttons, no switches. Everything's based on gesture and intent. He waved his hand, and a holographic display bloomed to life, showing systems that made his engineering background seem primitive by comparison. 12 minutes until Vexir intercept. Rick Stahl's voice crackled through their comms. Kate felt drawn to a circular chamber ahead, her steps quickening. The room was massive, its ceiling lost in shadows above. As they entered, their presence triggered something. A figure materialized in the center, a hologram of a woman in an elaborate uniform that combined elegant design with obvious military purpose. Identity confirmed. Human neural patterns detected. Emergency protocol activated. The hologram's voice was clear, speaking perfect English despite its age. I am Admiral Helena Drake, Earth Empire Defense Force, final commander of the Terra's Fury. Kate and James exchanged shocked looks. Earth Empire, Kate asked. Your confusion is expected, the hologram responded. You are the inheritors we planned for, but you don't remember. You can't remember. That was the point. The chamber filled with images, vast fleets of human ships, cities that spanned entire planets, technologies that made current civilization look primitive. Humanity once ruled half the galaxy, Admiral Drake's hologram continued. Not through conquest, but through innovation. We were different from the other species. Where they saw patterns, we saw possibilities. Where they built with logic, we built with inspiration. What happened? James asked, his voice barely a whisper. The logic plague. New images appeared, showing massive geometric ships unlike anything they'd seen. A species we called the predecessors. They believed the galaxy's chaos could be solved through perfect mathematical order. Their solution was to remake all sentient life in their image, to eliminate what they saw as the inefficiency of emotion and creativity. 7 minutes to intercept, Rick Stahl warned. The hologram's expression grew grave. We fought them to a standstill, but at a terrible cost. The Terra's Fury was our answer. A warship that turned human unpredictability into a weapon. But we realized victory wouldn't be enough. The predecessors' influence had spread too far, infecting too many civilizations with their doctrine of perfect logic. Kate's eyes widened. The Vexir. Their obsession with mathematical precision. Are echoes of the predecessors' influence, the hologram confirmed. We made a choice. Using technology you would now call impossible, we reset humanity. Returned our species to a primitive state, hid our technology throughout the galaxy, and planted the seeds for our natural redevelopment. Freed from the taint of the logic plague, free to evolve our chaotic creativity naturally. 5 minutes. James was already moving to what looked like a control station. How do we wake this ship up? The Vexir are coming, and they're probably the biggest threat since your time. The ship is already awakening, Admiral Drake said. Your presence, your thoughts, your human chaos. They're exactly what it needs. The Terra's Fury doesn't run on logic or mathematics. It runs on human nature itself. The chamber hummed with growing power. Streams of light began flowing through the geometric patterns on the walls, responding to their mere presence. 3 minutes to intercept. You'll find the ship's systems intuitive, the hologram said, starting to fade. They were designed for human minds, human instincts. Trust yourselves. Trust your species' greatest strength, the ability to act without perfect logic, to create without perfect order. As the hologram vanished, Kate felt the ship responding to her thoughts, its systems opening up like blooming flowers in her mind. Beside her, James was already integrating with the engineering controls, his expression one of wonder. 1 minute to intercept. Kate took a deep breath, feeling the ancient warship's power thrumming through her consciousness. Well, Commander Rodriguez, ready to show the galaxy what chaos can do. James grinned. After you, Dr. Sullivan. The Vexir fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect mathematical formation, a dodecahedron of destruction comprised of 30 warships, each positioned with microscopic precision. Their targeting computers were already calculating optimal firing solutions based on the Confederate science vessel's mass and shield capabilities. They weren't expecting the science vessel to be empty. "They're scanning for us," Kate reported. From what they'd figured out was the primary control nexus. The Terra's Fury's interface wasn't anything like modern ships. Instead of displays and readouts, she experienced the sensor data as intuitive feelings and impressions. "They know we're here, but they can't get a lock on us." "That's because we're not where they think we are," James replied, his hands dancing through the air as he worked with the engineering systems. "This ship's stealth technology doesn't just bend light, it bends probability itself. We're simultaneously in 12 different positions according to their sensors." The Terra's Fury had awakened fully now, responding to their presence like an eager animal. The ship's interior had transformed from dormant geometric patterns to flowing rivers of light that pulsed in sync with their heartbeats. Every system was designed to work with human instinct rather than against it. "Their formation is shifting," Kate announced. "They're going to try to saturate the area with weapons fire. Standard Vexir tactic. If you can't find the target, eliminate all possible locations simultaneously." James grinned. "Want to show them why that's a bad idea?" "I think I've figured out the weapon systems." The weapons interface was unlike anything in modern ships. Instead of targeting computers and firing solutions, it operated purely on human hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness. James found himself instinctively understanding how to aim and fire, as if the weapons were simply extensions of his own body. "Ready when you are," he said. Kate felt the ship's movement controls responding to her thoughts. No need for navigational calculations or thrust vectoring. The Terra's Fury moved exactly how she imagined it should move. "Here we go." The Vexir opened fire, their energy weapons cutting precise geometric patterns through space that would, mathematically, hit any target in the area. But Kate didn't try to calculate an escape route. She simply moved the way her instincts told her to, letting the ship dance through the barrage like a leaf in the wind. "Impossible," they heard a Vexir commander broadcast. "No ship can move through that pattern. The mathematics are perfect." "That's why you're losing," James muttered, taking aim. He didn't use targeting computers or calculations. He simply pointed and fired, letting 50 millennia of human evolution, of throwing spears and skipping stones, guide his shot. The weapon that launched wasn't an energy beam or a missile. It was a sphere of twisted space-time that moved in ways that violated every law of physics the Vexir understood. It curved around their shields, ignored their defensive calculations, and turned one of their heaviest cruisers into abstract art. By the numbers, the Vexir commander's voice crackled again, this time with something approaching fear. That weapon's trajectory was human, Kate finished, even though they couldn't hear her. She spun the ship through another impossible series of moves, positioning them perfectly for James's next shot. The second weapon fired was even stranger, a cascade of quantum possibilities that turned 3 Vexir ships into quantum uncertainty fields. They existed and didn't exist simultaneously, their crews trapped in a state of cosmic uncertainty that their logical minds couldn't process. "This is incredible," James said, already preparing another weapon. "The targeting system. It works better the more I trust my gut. The less I think about it, the more accurate it becomes." Kate understood. The ship wasn't just using their bodies or their minds. It was using human nature itself as an operating system. Every instinct honed by evolution, every neural pathway shaped by millennia of survival, every uniquely human trait was a weapon here. "Multiple ships charging hyperdrives," she reported, feeling rather than seeing the energy buildups. "They're starting to realize their logic has no power here." "Good," James replied, his fingers dancing through another firing sequence. Let's show them what 50,000 years of human evolution can really do. News of the Terra's Fury's awakening spread through the Vexir fleet like a virus, corrupting their perfectly ordered battle plans. The massive warships seemed to appear and disappear at will, moving in ways that their tactical computers insisted were mathematically impossible. Another fleet incoming, Kate announced, experiencing the sensor data as ripples of intuition across her consciousness, 3 times larger than the last one. They're trying to establish a probability lock on our position. James stood at the weapons interface, his movements now fluid and natural as he worked with systems that felt more like musical instruments than weapons of war. They still think they can solve this with numbers, he said, his hands orchestrating another attack sequence. The Terra's Fury's main weapon array activated, but instead of firing directly, it created a series of temporal eddies, localized time distortions that aged different parts of space at different rates. Vexir ships caught in the effect experienced their bow sections aging thousands of years, while their stern sections remained in the present, their perfectly engineered hulls tearing themselves apart across time itself. Priority transmission from the Vexir command, Kate reported. They're demanding we stop violating the laws of physics. James actually laughed. Tell them physics isn't a law. It's more like a guideline. The ship's systems responded to his amusement, transforming it into a new type of attack. Waves of probability distortion rolled out from the Terra's Fury, turning the Vexir's precise formations into quantum uncertainty fields. Ships existed in multiple positions simultaneously, their crews' logical minds unable to process the paradox of being everywhere and nowhere at once. Multiple contacts, port side, Kate called out, feeling the approach of enemy vessels through the ship's enhanced sensory system. They're trying something new, coordinated time-space calculations to predict our movements. Let's show them why that won't work, James replied, his fingers dancing through another firing sequence. This time, the weapons created what could only be described as a knot in reality, a twisted confluence of space, time, and probability that moved like a living thing through the enemy fleet. The Vexir, their entire civilization built on perfect mathematical models, had no defense against weapons that operated on human whimsy. Their shields were calibrated for energy weapons and kinetic impacts, not for attacks that treated the laws of physics like suggestions. Their formations are breaking down, Kate reported with a mixture of awe and satisfaction. They're panicking. Their ships are moving without tactical coordination. The scene outside was chaos incarnate. The Terra's Fury danced through space like a leaf in a storm, each movement guided by Kate's instincts rather than navigational computers. James's weapons created effects that defied description. Gravity waves that moved like ocean swells, temporal cascades that followed artistic patterns rather than ballistic trajectories, quantum fields that responded to emotional input rather than mathematical calculations. New contact. Kate's voice rose with urgency. Massive energy signature. They've called in a logic core. The Vexir's superweapon emerged from hyperspace, a perfect sphere of crystalline computation, designed to impose mathematical order on reality itself. Its surface was covered in equations of such complexity that looking at them could drive lesser minds mad. They think they can outcalculate us, James said, studying the monstrosity through the ship's intuitive interface. They still don't understand what they're fighting against. Kate felt the Terra's Fury responding to their combined intent, its systems harmonizing with their thoughts and emotions. The logic core is powering up. They're going to try to normalize local space-time, force everything to follow strict mathematical laws. Perfect, James replied, his hands moving through a complex sequence that felt as natural as conducting a symphony. Let's show them what happens when you try to force human nature into a box. The Terra's Fury's primary weapons array began to power up, not with cold calculation, but with the full spectrum of human chaos, imagination, intuition, creativity, and the fundamental unpredictability that had helped their species survive and evolve for millions of years. The battle that followed would reshape the galaxy's understanding of warfare forever. The logic core's attack began with absolute precision, a wave of pure mathematical force designed to normalize spacetime and eliminate any probability abnormalities. Under normal circumstances, it would have been unstoppable. But the Terra's fury was no longer operating under normal circumstances. "They're trying to impose order on local spacetime," Kate reported, experiencing the assault through the ship's sensory systems, forcing everything to follow strict mathematical principles. James stood at the weapon's interface, his expression suddenly thoughtful. "You know what this reminds me of?" His hands began moving in a new pattern, one that felt less like targeting and more like playing an instrument. "My grandmother's jazz collection." The weapons responded instantly, transforming from tools of destruction into something entirely different. Instead of firing direct attacks, they began creating patterns of quantum interference that moved like musical notes through space. "Jazz?" Kate asked, even as she instinctively moved the ship in rhythm with James's improvisations. "Think about it," James said, his movements becoming more fluid. "Jazz isn't about following strict rules. It's about improvisation, feeling, the spaces between the notes. It's ordered chaos." The Terra's Fury's weapons created effects that followed jazz patterns, quantum fluctuations that swung like bebop, temporal distortions that flowed like blues scales, probability waves that moved with syncopated rhythms. The logic core's attempts to impose mathematical order were met with the fundamental unpredictability of human artistic expression. "Their systems are struggling to compensate," Kate reported, feeling the Vexor's confusion through the ship's sensors. "They can't predict where our attacks will land because there's no mathematical pattern to follow." "Exactly," James grinned, his hands dancing through another sequence. "You can't calculate jazz. You have to feel it." The space around them transformed into a symphony of chaos. Where the logic core tried to establish perfect mathematical order, the Terra's fury responded with quantum jazz, reality itself beginning to swing and improvise. Vexor ships caught in the effect found their perfectly calculated formations dissolving into patterns that followed emotional rather than mathematical logic. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," Kate announced. They're demanding we stop introducing undefined variables into the battlefield." "Oh, they haven't seen undefined variables yet," James replied, his movements becoming even more fluid. "Let's show them what happens when we really start to improvise." The Terra's Fury's weapon systems fully synchronized with James's creative inspiration. Each attack became a note in a greater composition, each defensive move part of a larger rhythm. The ship wasn't just fighting anymore, it was performing, turning combat into art. The logic core's crystalline surface began to show fracture patterns as it encountered phenomena it couldn't quantify. Its attempts to impose mathematical order were met with purely human expressions of creativity, quantum effects that moved like dance steps, temporal distortions that flowed like watercolors, probability fields that shifted like poetry. "Their primary processors are overloading," Kate reported with a hint of awe. "They're trying to calculate patterns that don't exist, predict movements that follow emotional rather than mathematical logic." James nodded, deep in his improvisational flow. "You can't calculate human creativity. You can't predict inspiration. That's what our ancestors understood. The true power of human chaos isn't in its destructive potential, but in its ability to create something new." The battle had become a performance piece, with the Terra's fury conducting a symphony of controlled chaos across spacetime. The Vexor fleet, trained to respond to mathematical patterns and logical progressions, found themselves audience to a display they couldn't comprehend. "The logic core is initiating an emergency shutdown," Kate announced. "Their entire command structure is in disarray. They've never encountered anything like this." "Jazz has that effect on people," James replied, his hand still moving through the firing sequences that had become more like musical phrases. "Imagine trying to calculate Miles Davis or predict John Coltrane. Some things just can't be reduced to numbers." Around them, Reality itself seemed to dance to their improvised rhythm, the ancient human warship transforming warfare into art and destruction into creation. The Vexir High Command received the battle footage with growing horror. Their most advanced analytical systems couldn't make sense of what they were seeing. The ancient human warship didn't just break the laws of physics, it ignored them entirely, treating the fundamental constants of the universe as mere suggestions. Impossible, High Commander Vectrol whispered, his crystalline form clouding with confusion as he watched the Terra's fury turn warfare into art. Our civilization has spent millennia perfecting the mathematics of combat. Every variable accounted for, every outcome calculated. High Commander, his chief scientist interrupted, we're receiving reports of widespread psychological disruption among our fleet crews. They're asking questions. Vectrol's form darkened further. Questions were dangerous. Questions led to uncertainty, and uncertainty was the enemy of order. Meanwhile, aboard the Terra's Fury, Kate and James were discovering more of the ship's capabilities with each passing moment. The vessel's database had begun opening to them, revealing technologies that transformed human nature itself into a weapon. Look at this, Kate called out, her mind interfacing directly with the ship's archives. They didn't just build weapons, they built an entire technological philosophy based on human unpredictability. James moved to join her, his hands still tingling from conducting their symphony of destruction. The database projected images around them, devices that operated on human emotion, engines powered by creativity, shields that grew stronger the more chaotic the situation became. Their entire fleet is in disarray, Kate reported, feeling the tactical situation through the ship's intuitive sensors. But it's not just military chaos. Their whole command structure is unraveling. The ship's psychometric sensors are detecting widespread philosophical crises among the Vexir crews. They're starting to question their own logic, James realized. Seeing what we can do, it's making them doubt everything they believed about the nature of reality. The ship's archives continued to unfold before them, revealing the true genius of their ancestors. Every technology was designed to become more powerful the more human its operators behaved. Weapons that grew stronger with emotional input, shields that adapted based on intuition, engines that drew power from creative thinking. Incoming transmission, Kate announced. The Vexir are. They're asking for a temporary ceasefire. They want to understand. Understanding is impossible. Vectrol's voice crackled through the comm. Your weapons follow no logical patterns. Your movements defy mathematical prediction. Your very existence corrupts the perfect order we have spent millennia establishing. James exchanged a look with Kate before responding. That's because you're trying to understand chaos through the lens of order. You're trying to calculate the incalculable. The universe operates on precise mathematical principles. Vectrol insisted, but there was a tremor in his voice now. Does it? Kate asked, drawing on the ship's database. Or is that just what you want to believe? Look at quantum mechanics, particles that exist in multiple states simultaneously. Look at human consciousness, emotions that can't be reduced to equations. The universe isn't a math problem to be solved. It's a dance to be danced. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the Vexir fleet, crews were experiencing something they had never known before: doubt. The sight of human technology operating on principles that defied their mathematical worldview was shattering millennia of certainty. Your fleet is breaking formation, Kate observed through the ship's sensors. Your crews are. They're starting to move based on instinct rather than calculation. No, Vectrol's voice was barely a whisper. No, we must maintain order. We must. Must you? James asked quietly. Or is that just another assumption you've never questioned? The Terra's Fury sensors detected more than just military chaos now. They were witnessing the beginning of a philosophical revolution. Ships were breaking ranks not because of tactical necessity, but because their crews were experiencing individual thought for the first time in generations. We're detecting massive power fluctuations across their fleet, Kate reported. Their systems are destabilizing, not from damage, but from their operators' uncertainty. "They're learning to question," James said, "and for a civilization built on perfect mathematical certainty, questions are more devastating than any weapon we could fire," Kate finished, watching as the mighty Vexor fleet began to dissolve not into defeat, but into transformation. The formal surrender of the Vexor Empire took place exactly 72 hours after the Terra's fury first awakened. But it wasn't the surrender anyone had expected. Instead of a military defeat, it was an awakening. The Great Hall of the Confederate Council Chamber was packed with representatives from 17 species, all watching as High Commander Vectrol approached the podium. His crystalline form, once perfectly ordered, now showed subtle variations, the first signs of individualistic expression in Vexir society in thousands of years. "We surrender," he began, then paused, struggling with concepts that had been alien to his species for millennia. "No, that's not accurate. We change. We choose to change." Kate and James stood at the side of the chamber, the data crystal from the Terra's fury heavy in Kate's hand. The ship's database had revealed far more than weapons and technology. It held the story of humanity's first rise and their deliberate fall. "The logic plague that our ancestors feared," Kate whispered to James. "It wasn't a virus or a weapon. It was an idea. The belief that perfect order was the ultimate goal of existence." Vectrol continued, his voice growing stronger. "For millennia, we believed that mathematics was the fundamental truth of the universe. We sought to impose that truth on reality itself. But in facing the Terra's fury, in witnessing human chaos in its purest form, we have learned something profound. The universe is not a problem to be solved." The council chamber erupted in murmurs as Vectrol's crystalline form shifted, displaying colors and patterns that hadn't been seen in his species for generations. "The human ship didn't defeat us with superior firepower. It defeated us with possibility. It showed us that there are questions more powerful than answers, that uncertainty can be strength, that chaos can be beautiful." Admiral Ulthera stepped forward, her compound eyes reflecting the historic moment. "And what of the Vexir Empire?" "The Empire as you knew it ceased to exist the moment we witnessed human creativity unleashed," Vectrol replied. "Our worlds are in philosophical revolution. Our people are learning to question, to wonder, to imagine. It is terrifying and exhilarating." Kate stepped forward, holding up the data crystal. "There's more," she announced to the chamber. "The Terra's fury wasn't just a weapon. It was a message from our ancestors and a map." The crystal projected a galactic display, showing hundreds of points of light. "These are other sites, other vessels, other technologies, all waiting for humanity to reclaim them." "But why?" a council member asked. "Why hide such power?" James answered, understanding now the true wisdom of their ancestors. "Because they knew that power without wisdom leads to destruction. They didn't want us to find these ships and weapons until we'd evolved the wisdom to use them properly, not through technological advancement, but through the development of our humanity itself." "The coordinates are encrypted," Kate added, "coded to unlock only when humanity reaches certain cultural and philosophical milestones. The Terra's fury was just the first key. There are others, waiting for us to grow into them." Vectrol's form shimmered with new patterns. "Then perhaps the Vexir can learn from humanity. Not to become human, but to remember how to embrace uncertainty again, to find our own path to chaos." The chamber filled with light as the Terra's fury, hovering in orbit above, activated its quantum communication array. The hologram of Admiral Drake appeared one final time, but now her message played for all species to hear. "To those who find this ship, you are not discovering humanity's past, but its future. We hid our legacy not in shame, but in hope. Each vessel, each technology, each secret waiting to be found will unlock only when you are ready for it. Not through force of arms or mathematical precision, but through the growth of wisdom, creativity, and the beautiful uncertainty that makes us human." Kate looked out at the assembled species, the logical, the ordered, the mathematical, all now witnessing the power of human chaos. "We're not reclaiming an empire," she said softly. "We're building something new, something that embraces both order and chaos, certainty and doubt, logic and creativity." James smiled, taking her hand. "And this time, we're not doing it alone." Above them, the Terra's fury pulsed with light, the first beacon of a new age where humanity's greatest strength, its beautiful, unpredictable chaos, would help guide the galaxy toward a future that no equation could calculate and no logic could predict.